cultivating moral excellence and being a good person makes life worth living. Oh, that's what living well is. In order for me to, how do I maximize the good? In order for me to maximize the good, I need to take care of myself. And I need to take care of myself mentally, spiritually, physically. Good suggests that there's others involved. So I need to care, I have to give some attention to my capacity to relate to other human beings, to relate to other non-human animals, to relate to the physical world, and understanding the impact of my choices on those relationships. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today's conversation is going to be a little bit different. I got my brother Andrew on the pod with me this morning to interview me. We did this last year or earlier?
About a year ago.
About a year ago. Yeah, and Andrew is going to ask me some questions about the podcast, my experience with the podcast, where I'm at, and I don't know. Let's see where it goes. You know how this podcast works, where it's spontaneous, it's creative. We'll see what's in the flow today. Neither one of us we haven't had much sleep. That seems to be a common theme. Maybe I get too excited, before the podcast the night before, and especially when it's in the morning, and I'm like buzzing and then can't hardly sleep. And then last night was particularly egregious
Uh-huh.
in terms of sleep. But we're going to explore and play. I think as the conversation unfolds, I will probably say something about that, this process and what happens and what makes a conversation um, such as these work out. How does it work out, and what determines the? I know the overall theme is living well, the good life, but the nature of that conversation has so many different factors. You can plan something and then it just completely becomes something other than what you plan, and that's the thing I love about it, because it's improvisation, spontaneous creativity, which is important, I think, and important part of what I'm trying to encourage in doing these conversations and sharing it with everyone. So
Yeah, well, authentic human connection, right? That I think that's at least what I get from listening to the pod is a lot of that authentic human connection.
yeah, exactly. Again, that's the whole goal again of the podcast, is to inspire dialogue and conversation with one another and reflection. And I guess I can say a little bit about what I was going to say later. Um, is that it's different every moment, a different day. You may have a set of core values or themes that you have about what it means to live a good life, but the conversation that you have in that moment is impacted by so many different factors. What's happening in your life? How much sleep did you have?
Right.
How much caffeine you're on or
Right,
not?
right.
Oh no, what your mood is like, or what's in the news if you're paying attention to that, and all of these different factors. And I think it's important to have that conversation because it's just a snapshot of a moment, and what is happening in one's life at that moment is going to bring to surface an aspect or a perspective, a piece of the overall perspective
Hmm.
that's going to be highlighted based on the circumstances of the uh, the experiences that surrounds the moment of the conversation. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I like that though. I like it because it encourages us that the conversation is ongoing, it never stops. We're going to always learn something because our mood, moment is always going to be different. It's never going to be the same. Even if we talk about the same thing, the way we talk about it, the impact of that conversation on us is going to be different for every conversation that we end up having, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And so, kind of going off, I mean, last year when we had this conversation, we were kind of unpacking and exploring a little bit just your background, but just going a little further with what you were talking about. It sounds like the podcast itself and the conversations you've been having have adjusted the way you're looking at it, the way you're approaching it, the way you're listening. So, tell me a little more about that. How this last year, really since we talked on here about it, we talk all the time, but since we talked
Yeah.
on here about it, tell me a little bit how your approach has changed, what your process has been like, and kind of what you've taken away from it all. It sounds like more free flowing and just being open to the changes, but tell me more about it.
Oh wow, man, that's a big question. You want me to talk now for the
I
rest of this
jump
time?
right in, bro. Let's go. Let's go. I thought that's what I was here for. I got other
Well,
questions too. I'll interrupt you, bro. I'll interrupt you. Don't worry
okay,
about it.
good, good,
Yeah, yeah.
good, good. I'm like, man, that's everything.
No, we're not just gonna sit here for a lecture.
Good, because you know me, I can
Mhm.
fire it off.
Oh, I know.
But no, a lot has happened. Man, the first year, it was new to me, of course, and I had these ideas about interviewing primarily the elders and getting their voice, and I think I was, yeah, it was really wide open last year. And since then, though, we've had some changes. The political climate has changed a little bit, just a little bit.
Just
And I think that
smidge.
just yeah, just a smidgen, yeah, and it
Yeah.
has definitely impacted again the circumstances that we find ourselves in has
Mm,
definitely impacted my perspective on the podcast. I found that it's been a little bit more challenging to get interviews this
mm,
last year, maybe because people are kind of out of it. And I worked a lot last year doing all kinds of other activities. And yeah, it's been quite a fascinating journey, actually.
mm.
Since then, it's so much has happened. And my perspective has evolved so much since then.
So
And one, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, so one of the things, as one of your non-elders, one of the things that I know has changed for you has just been that perspective of shifting a little bit of hearing a little more what some of the youth have to offer, what their insights are. I know before it was a little more looking at elders for some of the wisdom there, but yeah, share what brought that change about and where you're kind of looking to hear more voices as well.
Yeah, actually, that was the plan. The first year was to focus on 50 and older, and then I was going to drop to the 40s, 30s. As time went along, just to get
Yeah.
a little broader perspective. And I interviewed a person, and they suggested like, yeah, it would be nice to have some younger voices on here just to kind of get their perspective. And I was like, yeah, that's in the plan. That was in the original plan to have that comment on have that perspective on the podcast as well. So yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed that because the main reason why I wanted to have the elders on primarily because the longer you live, the more mistakes you make, the more you learn from your
Mm.
mistakes. And you're right, and
Mm.
there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that. And when we're younger, we're a little bit more idealistic, and I wanted to have those conversations um, as the background or the backdrop to these further conversations, having conversations with folks who haven't lived as long and haven't made as many mistakes
Mhm.
and seeing what their perspective is on this and um yeah, so I think yeah that it's been interesting. I haven't
Yeah.
interviewed enough younger people yet. I want to do more. I have all kinds of ideas for this podcast, and
Mhm.
I guess I should say, I think one thing, and I'll come back to this, is I expected more listenership
Mm,
than I have had, and that's been a big learning lesson to me. And I think since our last conversation, and since the political climate, see, I think my mind is working a little slow because of lack of sleep, but now it's coming into focus what I wanted to say. Um, is
you need a
that
little more of that mate, and you,
I know,
yeah,
right? Let me take a little sip of that right now, just
yeah.
because you said it.
Oh yeah, cheers.
I know, right? And the listeners like these boys are crazy.
Oh yeah,
Um,
we're family, man. It's all good.
I know, right? And I think I'm gonna be honest. I was disappointed, but I think I've learned something really big. I think I've come to grips with something I think is really big. Is that with this last election, and I have done a solo podcast talking about this, and I realized that as a society, our moral standards are not as high as I thought they were.
Mm,
And I think you know that you and I we've had conversations about this kind of stuff, but you kind of there's this hopefulness in the back of my mind, like, yeah, man, people are better than this. We are at a stage of our development where our moral development where we won't tolerate certain things. And I feel like, okay, I was wrong about that. And I think that this podcast and me not doing, and I refuse to do the various hacks,
mm,
social media hacks, and things of that nature to kind of blast the podcast and make it popular. So I haven't done that. So that's a big reason why. Like I want this to go word of mouth, and people will be interested in it based on that. And I realized that a lot. I'm not now. Some of it is me too. I'm not saying that
mhm.
I'm so great and that people just not wanting to listen to me because I'm not. Because I'm so great, and yeah, which doesn't even make any
Yeah.
sense. I'm so good that people don't want to listen to me. So I'm definitely not saying that. I'm saying that, or that I don't have any that I don't have any growing room for growth as an interviewer and things of that nature. I
Mm,
know I
mhm,
do. But I think that's not necessarily the reason why. I just don't think that
mm,
a lot of us are really genuinely interested in an hour long conversation exploring this theme. I think it's a
mhm.
scary thing to explore because it forces us to look at ourselves and evaluate our perspective on reality. It forces us to evaluate our moral outlook on life.
Yeah.
You listen to the podcast as an interviewer, these themes keep coming up: community, others, how we
Mhm.
affect the world by our choices is a part of what it makes a life a good life, that it extends beyond our own skin, the way I like to say
Yeah.
it. And there's a responsibility associated with that. And I think that that requires a certain level of moral clarity in terms of um, being really interested in the well-being of others, not just the well-being of ourselves. And I just feel like as a culture that that it is not as important as other things. I think it is important for people, but it's just not at the top. And so these types of
No, for
conversations are not going to be prioritized versus other things that our culture encourages us to attend to.
yeah. Well, and I think going off some of that too, some of it is just even contemplation, right? Thinking deeply
Mm-hmm.
about life, thinking what is a good life? How can I live a good life? What are those questions to me? That's what listening to pods then for me is also brought to the forefront of thinking, do I agree with this as a reason for a good life, right? A life well lived, from
Mm-hmm.
some of the guests that have been on or some of the ideas you shared. And it makes me contemplate for myself. And I think, our attention spans in culture and society these days are so short. It's not about that slow down, that introspective worldview. It's about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. You listen to 90% of the pods you have about 5 minutes and then a break, or 5 minutes and then a topic switch, and then five, and it's just it,
Yeah.
it is the world we're in right now is all about. I mean, even movies. You watch a movie from the 80s compared to now. they allow plot and they allow space and they allow time, but in modern day movies or shows, it's boom, 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 boom. So I think, one thing, and this is probably more of a question for you too, is one thing you're saying word of mouth, but I think part of it too is drawing the right crowd, right? Drawing the people that want that slow burn, want that introspection, and want to take time to, listen for an hour and reflect on their life. And so you're not just trying, from what we've talked about before, you're not just trying to get anyone and catch any and everyone. It sounds that you're, really focused on people that are going to be more introspective and contemplative and thinking about how to live a good life. Would that be accurate?
Oh yeah, that's it. And I think, and again, folks who are listening to this, who come across this, it's not a judgment on people, a negative judgment on people. It's just a honest assessment about where we are, what we prioritize, and the reason why we're not prioritizing those things because we are conditioned. The environment that we find ourselves in, particularly with social media, and it's this,
Hmm.
and it's been this way for quite some time. This instant sense of instant gratification,
Yeah.
these YouTube shorts and TikTok videos, and a 1 minute, minute and a half segment on Instagram or Facebook. Those are the things that we're accustomed to being. That's the environment that we find ourselves in, and when you're embedded in a particular environment, you start to adopt that way of being in the world. And I
Yeah.
think that we're looking for these little short hits. I want a little 5 minute clip,
Mm.
and that's all the time I have. And I'm like, I won't do it. I think I've accidentally posted some shorts because of the platform when I went to Substack and start using that. It automatically creates them for me. But I try to avoid that. I'm like, no. And I know that those are ways to hack and get attention. I do post on Instagram one little clip on Instagram of the podcast, and I don't do all the various hacks. Maybe I could and should. I don't want to say should. It's just not what I'm interested in doing. And so, even like here, that's a good example. The Instagram post that I have, and it goes to Facebook as well. It gets lots of looks. People like it. Some people will comment on it. I mean, hundreds of looks. And when you go into the actual interview, if I look across all platforms, not a lot of people listen to the full interview, but they like that one clip. So I pick a
Mm.
clip of the person that I'm interviewing, not myself, but a person that I'm interviewing to highlight the give them a little taste of the conversation. But it's an invitation for me. It's an invitation to uh, co and listen to the conversation, to really explore. Because
Mhm.
again, you're right. The audience, I don't want to say the audience I'm looking for, but the audience who are more likely to stay with this, they're going to have the intentions, the attention span to listen to an hour long conversation and to be open and receptive to exploring the ideas,
Mhm.
and be open to the
Yeah.
messiness of the podcast. Again, I don't have certain questions that I ask in order to maintain your attention. I'm just having a natural, organic conversation. And I think that's what I'm trying to encourage, to vicariously have that conversation with us and learn through that. Ask ourselves the hard questions. What has been sparked inside of me in this conversation? Agreements or disagreements, all that is great.
Mhm.
And judgments about it, criticisms about it, that's great. You're engaged in the conversation, in the dialogue. And hopefully, for me, that it inspires you to reflect on your own self, your own ideas. I think it automatically does that, even if you're criticizing the thing and you're listening to it. Um, but also, I'm hopeful that people are going and having these conversations with just hopefully it's organically happening, having conversations with friends, family, colleagues, or whatever, to inspire that. But that requires a certain level of attentiveness that um, we are being, how do I say this? We're being pulled away. That is being pulled away from us with our current society and our current what do you call them, instruments of communication,
Mhm. Mhm.
with social media, and the way that all of these things work. It's designed to hijack our attention. I guess what they call it, the attention economy. And there are
Yeah.
ways to hijack the human psychology using various hacks that I'm not going to do. And I'm like, well, I'm interested in mature people sitting down to be witnessing or having interested in this type of long form conversation and exploring this theme of the good life. And I just think it's hard to listen to this. I mean, I'm going to say hard to listen to. I think it's hard to explore this question because
Hmm.
when once we start to do that, we have to ask these challenging questions of ourselves, and I think that can be a little more
Well,
intimidating for a lot of us.
yeah, well, it's a open and loaded question, right? Very much the,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what is the good life? What's a life well lived? And so, so kind of exploring that a little bit. Since we last talked, you've talked to plenty of other people. You've had more time doing this. How have these interviews that you've done changed, how you're viewing, your view of what the good life was before coming into it versus, kind of where you are now and how you perceive it may change in the future too.
Man, good question. That's a big question.
Yeah, so
Wow.
so we can take
I
it
think I
piecemeal.
think oh yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, just,
Uh,
even how do you feel it's changed just your day-to-day life and your view is even a good place to start.
yeah, I so my it has evolved, of course. I think the basic core values associated with what makes the life good life for me, those are still there. But I think I have a little bit more nuanced take on those because I've been able to see all of these different perspectives from others. Me, and I'm constantly reading and studying and
Hmm.
looking at ideas and exploring ideas in the process and matching that up against with the current affairs, current things that are happening in our world. I think so. For me, a good life is a process. Living well is a process, and I have these foundational aspects of that process that are important to me. So your physical well-being, and the well-being of in terms of your relationships, some kind of spiritual connection, um, and all of that is rooted. And there's more, but all of that is rooted in, or I should say, psychological, emotional well-being. Just to be clear, to round that out.
Yeah.
But that's all rooted in these core values of love, goodness, and beauty for me. And there are other ones as well, all these positive qualities associated with life. And the process of a good life is a life that is dedicated to cultivating those qualities in one's life. And what I've learned in this podcast is that the value of doing that and why it's so important to do that and why it is a responsibility. It is incumbent on us to do that if we want to see a more beautiful world, if we want to see more goodness and love in the world. Cultivating those qualities or cultivating the virtues, living a virtuous life. My view
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
similar to that of the ancient Greeks, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, and their general perspective on the good life and this process of cultivating excellence. This process of cultivating moral excellence and being a good person makes life worth living. Or that's
Mhm.
what living well is. In order for me to, how do I maximize the good? In order for me to maximize the good, I need to take care of myself. And I need to
Yeah.
take care of myself mentally, spiritually, physically. Good suggests that there's others involved. So I need to care, I have to give some attention to my capacity to relate to other human beings, to relate to
Mhm.
other non-human animals, to relate to the physical world, and understanding the impact of my choices on those relationships. Because we're intertwined, interrelated. There's no way around it. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, there's interbeing.
Yeah.
My being in the world is not separate from anybody else's being. So every choice that I make, everything that I do has an impact. And so how my views have evolved based on these conversations that I've had is that I think people have given a slightly different take based on their life experience, a slightly different angle on that. They may not have used the
Mhm.
same terms, they may not have used the same ways of describing it. They may emphasize certain things. Somebody might emphasize, well-being in terms of physically,
Mhm.
spiritually, or psychologically. Some people emphasize community and being in relationship with others more so than someone else. But through that conversation, through that dialogue, I've gained a greater insight into my own perspective. I think it is added. It has added. Um, I want to say fuel. It has, well, you can say fuel to the. I guess you can say fuel. It has added some fuel to my drive to
Mm.
try to be as good as I can possibly be, or be as loving as I can possibly be. And it has also helped me see, where do I have blind spots? What am I
Mhm.
not taking into consideration? And also helping me understand that these subtle, nuanced differences in perspective, um, there's some room to play there, to play and explore in my own uh, take, that can help
Mhm.
me be better at living a more virtuous life. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what
Yeah.
I can
Well,
say right now. I'm like,
yeah,
my
but
brain ain't operating as clear as I would like, but I think that that's where I answered the best I could today.
yeah, well, that's all we can do any day, right? Is where am I at today? Can I meet the day? And that's when you talk about the Greeks, that's kind of where I lean to, right? Is there, it's really Aristotle with the doctrine of the mean, right? Like you have virtue, you have vice, and can I lean more towards virtue, but also understand that my virtue might be different than another's virtue, and having these
Mm-hmm.
conversations seems to open that up and expose that. And I, it's interesting you bring up TikTok and inner being with it too, because to me, the middle way, the middle path, that you could copy and paste and put it right over the doctrine of the mean, right? The vice and virtue, the
Mm-hmm.
middle way, finding this direction of connecting. And I think by having these conversations and exploring what might be virtuous to someone else that really stands out to them is exposing you to something that might be a little different and maybe virtuous to you, but not something that's front of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and it seems that that's been one of the things that has unfolded through the podcast. So as you are continuing this journey too, what other changes are you seeing both in how you're approaching it and what's coming up for you with it? Because you're human, right? So as you're having these conversations, like you mentioned, you might rub up against some ideas that you don't necessarily agree with. So as the host, how are you navigating those if you're coming up against it more and just continuing to refine that direction?
Good question. Here I think it's not so much that I disagree. I might disagree with not the core idea or concept. I might disagree with how it's placed.
Mhm.
So I may emphasize a different aspect of it.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, I won't say anything in particular because I
But it
won't
sounds like
reference
you're
any
saying
one
like
thing.
the
But
level of priority, right? So like for me, a very virtuous life involves tea, right? That might not be the top of priority for you, right?
mm,
But it's up there.
mm,
So so is that what you're getting at? Is just kind of the layer of prioritizing like
mm.
certain elements.
So I think there's a broader general concept for
Hmm.
me. I'll say, I'm just use an example of love because
Yeah.
that's like my thing,
Yeah.
my core value. I have a general broad concept of love, and someone may have a philosophical outlook. The way that their philosophical worldview may talk about it differently than
Mm.
my philosophical worldview. So the way that I see the world, the way that I filter the world, we're both talking about love, but they might
Hmm.
see it slightly different, and they may word it slightly different than I do because that's just based on their
Hmm.
worldview. And I think what I quote unquote bumped up against sometimes is, yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it, but I'm seeing it slightly different. I'm seeing this other
Hmm.
piece that I want to include in that. Or I might see something, or you know me, uh, I like thinking and I like exploring ideas. And sometimes I'm always seeing the was it the caveats? You
Hmm.
know, there's always a caveat to everything, and I see them even in my own view. And so I can really see that in certain things. So I try to highlight certain things where I'm like, yeah, I understand where this person is coming from. So I have to put myself in their shoes and not turn it into an argument about something little small thing and just say, oh, based on their worldview, I see exactly why they're saying it that particular
Hmm.
way. And it makes sense. It's not wrong, of course. I might have a slightly different take, or I might be considering something else that they may not be considering, but that's not so important for me.
Hmm.
In the conversation, what I try to do is when someone shares something in these conversations, and what I'm trying to model with the audience is like, okay, and we're having a dialogue. I want to now talk about what you're saying, what you just shared from my worldview, and
Hmm.
bring in these nuances that I think, if I could in that moment, not trying to challenge, not becoming a debate, but just sharing my take on it, using their language, using the way that they're seeing it. And of course, when I do that, I'm going to add a little bit of, that's based on my worldview. And I think that's a challenge, but it's also very fruitful in
Hmm.
that, okay, I can see what you're saying. That completely makes sense to me. Like for instance, like, someone may say, not necessarily on this podcast, but you've been around the yogic world, meditative, contemplative practice world. Someone would say, you're already it. You're already realized.
Hmm.
You're already divine, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yes, and gotta also be careful because someone might take that who's not ready, who don't fully comprehend and see
Hmm.
that as clearly as you do, and assume that they're enlightened. They figured it
Hmm.
out. Oh, everything is fine. I know. I've had an awakening moment. So I'm awakened, and I've had this realization, and then I have no more problems. I'm good. Nothing else I need to work on. Kind of mentality.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, actually not. I think that because the way I look at it is there's a self, there's an identity, there's a construct, and this construct that we have that we call ourselves, it contracts or limits the vastness of our divine nature. And so we act based on that sense of self, that structure, I act through Broderick.
Yeah.
And I even refer to that when I say I'm referring to Broderick. I'm not referring to my complete divine nature when I say I'm doing this, and not in a typical conversation I'm having with someone. And so when I'm referring to that, then I know that that is not completely aware of everything. I know that
Well,
it's not boundless, that it's limited, and therefore, if it's limited, then I'm going to be careful in trying to pat myself on the back too much. I'm going to be careful in suggesting that I'm divine because it can be easily hijacked by the quote unquote lower self. And you see that in gurus, you see that in all kinds of
hmm,
different places, ministers, preachers, rabbis, whatever spiritual person you want to call
yeah.
themselves. They think they're so enlightened because they have these general ideas, these general concepts that make sense, but it's being hijacked by the lower self, by
Right.
this identity. And I think that those are the kind of things that I meet up against in these conversations. But at the end of the day, I still feel and see where a person is coming from, and wanting to highlight and emphasize that the idea is that be more loving, be as good as
Yeah.
possible, take
Yeah.
care of yourself, all of these different things. So yeah.
Yeah. What strikes me is the Tao is nameless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and there, yeah, I mean, there are so many levels that we could get into, and I know you and I off the pod could talk for hours about that very concept that you're touching on there, and how people
I
can
know.
even take advantage of that. But keeping it
Exactly.
kind of focused in this sandbox. when we're looking at it, and you really exploring and having these conversations, hearing some of these different ideas. And maybe this is a presumption, but from what I can tell with the pod, one, I guess not goal, but intention maybe behind it is to try to increase more good in the world, more, thought-provoking ideas, more introspection. So with that kind of as a possible framework, what's your vision for, what's next for the pod? Is it continue to, explore in the same layout? Is it asking different questions, or where do you envision the pod going?
Okay, good question. I'm gonna bring in something you asked a question earlier about how
Yeah.
things have gone, and near the end of last year, I was working at this. I had this part time job, but it took a lot of time and energy, and so I had interview folks, and I just couldn't. I didn't have a chance to upload or edit because I'm doing everything myself. So there's a reason why I'm saying this, folks. Doing everything myself. I got a little overwhelmed, and then I was trying to release every week, and it just got to the point for like a month. And then then during the Christmas holiday, I was like, I'm just not even going to release it. I'd just rather
Mm.
just wait.
Yeah.
And I've decided to release the podcast. I didn't really want to. You know me, I like to stick to something. But I was like, for my own well being, I have other projects that I'm trying to get off the ground, and I'm going to release this every 2 weeks. I still want to be consistent. I like being consistent. I really didn't want to change it, but it just kept. I was almost forced to. People make interviews. And then they would have to cancel. It was just so many things kept happening. I was like, okay, just to be on the safe side for now, just do every 2 weeks. Um, and if I have to, just upload whenever I can. And I think listeners who are listening, they can, yeah, they'll hopefully they'll understand that who are regular listeners. Um, so where I want to go and where I've wanted to go, I want to expand a little bit. I wanted more listenership to do this, but I think I'm just going to do it. And a lot of what I have been doing is like, I want to emphasize just interviewing lots of friends that I know,
Mhm.
are people who are not necessarily who hadn't necessarily written books, who are not necessarily selling anything. I think that's one thing I've learned, and this is no knock against anybody who's I've interviewed because I don't think that's been it has been that much of an issue. But I want to really focus on interviewing people who have not necessarily trying to sell anything,
Mm.
and they're just open to have a. I don't care if they've written a book or not. I don't care if they're doing whatever work that they're doing, but they're interested in the conversation not as a means to market their material, but as a means to just have a open-ended, relaxed, candid conversation. Now I can't say that I've had that with everyone, even with people who do all kinds of work and who've just written books and stuff like that. But I really want to emphasize now, like, this is just a conversation. You're not necessarily trying to sell anything. You're just trying to have a conversation
Mhm.
and with someone exploring these ideas. Um, and I want to do more of that, and I want to have more people coming on and having multiple conversations. So people who've been on before, having a couple of them come on and have I don't know, 3-4 way conversation, a group dialogue.
Mm.
Not necessarily, yeah, it can be about living well, but some aspect of it. There were a couple of gentlemen I wanted to have back on. We just couldn't work out the scheduling. I'm going to try again, where they can talk about what does it mean to be within this context. I've already interviewed them about living well, but what does it mean to be a husband, to be a
Mm.
father, to be a man in society? What does that mean for you? And to really explore that, and again, under this umbrella of the good. Because again, you're right. My whole goal is to encourage more goodness in the world, more goodness, beauty,
Mhm.
and love. And various positive values and virtues in the world, and having conversations with people that kind of expound on those things, or having
Mm.
conversations with someone about a particular therapeutic thing and their experiences in that, and how uh, say craniosacral therapy, for instance, have a couple of people discussing and explaining and talking about that within the context of the good life, and why that could be beneficial to someone, or to have a therapist having a conversation about it. So really expanding it out and being open to all the great, I mean, the various possibilities, but still having it constrained by the theme of the podcast, exploring the good life. Even though we may touch on various different subjects, I don't know. Let's have a conversation about poetry, about
Yes.
literature, and how does literature influence or impact one's notion or perspective on what a good life means, for
So,
instance. So just kind of expanding it
overarching,
out.
yeah, yeah, overarching theme of the good, right? But and the good
Mm-hmm.
life, but through the different lens of various different people, and I like that idea
Exactly.
of multi I guess background conversations happening all together, because that's, to me, that's where a lot of the beauty of humanity is, when we get these other perspectives and we hear, we hear, oh, well, this is why I view it's the good life. This is why I view it is, and I do it through this lens. So like, even a potter, right? Making this piece
Yeah.
is a form of the good, and then a painter, this is the form of the good for me, right? And then like you said, literature, poetry, or a philosopher that's very analytical, right? Like there's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of different directions it could go. And kind of on
Yeah.
that, when we look forward, it usually is based on when we look forward on how we're looking to adjust and change some things, it often is based on stuff from the past that we learn from. That's why, you were kind of thinking, hey, I want to talk with people that are 50 and above, because they've had experiences that they've learned from. So looking back on the last bit with the pod, how has that, like, what would you do differently, I guess, or how has that informed you wanting to, um, bring some of these other elements into it?
Yeah, again, I mean, I kind of had that in mind from the beginning, and I kind of had kind of thought this out like this. I really wanted that as a foundation, having the elders come
Hmm.
on, and I still want more of that. I, I,
Yes,
I think that's important. I think that I want
absolutely.
this to be a
Yes.
platform where the elders have a voice to share their wisdom. I want that as much as I possibly can. I will always have that, but I think I've always wanted to extend it and explore in all kinds of other ways. I really wanted to, yeah, and spend more time. But reason why I kind of said the thing about the what happened last year, the space, and doing it every 2 weeks. The time commitment is quite a bit,
Hmm.
especially when you're doing all the editing and stuff by yourself. Boy,
Yeah.
some of them,
Yeah.
the software is pretty good, but like there's times where I'm like I have to fix a lot of stuff, and I'm like, man, this is a lot. But I really hope, and I wanted the larger following, a larger listening, larger number of listeners, um, to start to extend out and have all these other
Hmm.
conversations and expand it, because and ultimately, and I think it will. I just think it's going to take a lot longer. Doing it the way that I've done. I spoke with someone about it. I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, you doing it this way, it can, if you, as long as you're consistent. It's just going to take a while to find your audience, a consistent audience that's large. But I would love to just keep having these conversations, keep expanding it within this container, and really being open to all kinds of other possibilities. And the rest of the year, I'm just going to keep doing these interviews. Hopefully, I'll get to a point where I can interview several people together. I have some in mind. Of Yeah, I'm just going to keep expanding it. I went to Substack, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna start to host this through Substack. And then that way people can subscribe and donate to the pod. I hope people do. Please do that, because that'll help. And I hope I get enough people that donate to where I can really dedicate even more time to it. But realistically, I only have but a limited amount of time, and I want to keep it ad free. I'm going to do that. And again, I'm not going to do all the shorts and stuff. I'm not doing that shit. I'm just not, folks. Yeah, listen. You got to listen to the whole thing. And if you want a short, just go and click on a time and then find one for yourself. I don't know. But I think yeah, keeping it ad free, and I'm gonna keep putting it out there. For you, you know me, Andrew. I'm like, I just want to do good. I'm gonna do. I'm
Hmm.
doing this not to make money. Money be
Yeah.
great, good. Come on, bring it on. But
Just
I'm
so you
not
know,
doing this
audience,
because of
he'll
that.
he'll take it. He'll take it. Just send it in
I'll take
Substack.
it.
It's all good. He'll take it for sure.
Yeah, I
And
got no
yeah.
problem with that. But that's not why. That's not what's driving me. And I want to. And that will never drive me in doing this work.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm just not gonna do it. I'm not sorry. I'm just like I'm not gonna let that supersede what I've dedicated my life to, especially at this age. I'm like, shit, ain't no point in changing now. And I think I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to offer programming that I think that is useful. More people listen. I'll take ideas about what the listeners who are part of this community as we build this community. Who wants to listen? What do they want to listen to? It's still going to be contained. It's going to be constrained by the theme. But how do we have more of it? And I would love to, as it grows, to have live events. I think that's important. And you know all the work I do with around personal development, yoga,
Yeah.
as a very comprehensive practice for personal development and building community. I think having more and doing more with this and sharing and unpacking all of these other aspects of this, like the things, the various actions that one can take, practices, a particular, I offer a worldview, of course, and that can help facilitate the evolution of one's process of living a good life. I'll say it that
Yeah.
way. And I think, yeah, it's what's what I'm looking for. It's open. I'm open. It's a pretty open ended. I have a bunch of
Yeah.
ideas, but it's pretty open ended. And it's going to depend on the time that I have and what listeners want. But yeah, I'm not gonna stop. You know, I can't.
Yeah.
I want to go back to a weekly if I can get back to weekly. I would love to do that, but for now, I'm not gonna stress. You know, I didn't like it having to do it every 2 weeks, but I'm going to. This is just the best. It's best to do that right now until I get enough stability, enough interviews locked in to where I can release it every week again. But for now, weekly with these, and then I want to have group conversations. I want to have more and more and more and more, wherever that
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah. And best efforts, right? And that's
Yeah,
that in itself is part of the lesson of the good life. Is it's not perfect. It's not linear.
no.
It is life. It's moving. It's changing. It's adjusting. So really looking at it too. We've talked a bit about the direction the pod's been, where it's going. And a bit of what you've taken from it too. It sounds like one of the big overarching themes has always been continual learning. So speak more on that
Oh,
to me, on the importance of exposure and continue to be learning and developing both in conversations, but also in exploring the pod, and then just your own view about how learning is part of living the good life.
well, Andrew, I love that question. So here, audience, this is great. You asked about learning. You know, before this interview yesterday, before I, you know, didn't sleep, I was like, oh yeah, mate, that's important. I really want to stress learning. This is the biggest, the most important piece of the whole thing, and I haven't mentioned it. So thank you. This is a classic. This is a classic example of these conversations. I may want to talk about a particular thing, but prior to the conversation, but within the conversation, someone says something that sparks a reflection, and I think that I just love it. I love that you asked the question about learning because this is a good example of what I mean by um, um, the spontaneity, the being open, the openness to a conversation, not really knowing what's going to happen in the conversation, even if you have something that you would like to say and offer, unless you have it all written down and you're sticking with what's written down. And I'm not doing that. So, at any rate, learning is like the most important thing in life, I think. A love of learning because the more you learn, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast. I guess, yeah, the one before this, I think. why I think learning is so important, because when we learn something, we're expanding our awareness, we're increasing our sensitivity by learning. Um, and with that expanded awareness, we have a greater capacity to see, a greater capacity to understand and make sense of a situation. So our sense making capacity increases. And so we have more available to us as we explore life.
Mm,
And I think that this podcast is all about that. Even if I interview 10 people and their core theme is about, yeah, to be able to live a good life is to be in community. Those 10 people are going to say something different about it. They're going to have a different take on it. So I'm going to learn something. And by seeing through those 10 different perspectives, I'm expanding my understanding, my view,
mhm,
potentially at any rate, of what community means. And with that, I'm increasing the likelihood of engaging in loving community, as an example. So I'm increasing the likelihood of living a good life. I'm expanding my ideas about what that is. And so I have a greater amount of complexity. My view is a little bit more complex and sophisticated. So now I can therefore have a much more nuanced and sophisticated perspective on whatever it is that I'm attending to. And so if I'm attending to one aspect of being a good life is being a kind person, I have a much more knowledge. I have much more um, a greater capacity as a result of that knowledge, that
yeah,
increased
yeah,
awareness, to be a kind person. So it is essential to just living, period, I think. If you want to grow, so that learning to me is associated with growth and development and ultimately evolving oneself. And I think that that is essential in order for us to manifest this world that I'm seeking, a more loving, good, and beautiful world. Then that requires learning. It requires humans evolving and developing themselves. I mentioned earlier about the current climate that we find ourselves in, that people moral consideration or their
mm,
moral standards are not a high priority, as high of a priority to how do I word this carefully, because I don't want to be overly critical of people, but it's just not folks more. It appears that our more in our society, that our moral character, our moral standards are not a high priority. And I think it is. I think it should be the most important thing in our lives, and because that's associated with good and love. You can't be
mhm.
loving and good just all by yourself. That requires how we treat, how we relate to others. I think it's such a priority, and it realizing that it's not in our society because we don't emphasize it in our society. We don't emphasize it in our education. We're not taught to learn, continuously learning how to be a good person, how to be a moral agent in the world, and how to elevate our moral standards. That doesn't drive our society. Our society is driven by GDP. It's driven by the increasing amount of exchange of goods and services.
Well, and
And that could be that to me that could be subsumed under moral development or having high moral standards.
yeah,
So,
and I think a lot of if I'm hearing you correctly, but also instilling some of my view on this too is when we're talking learning, there's exposure to stuff, right? And not just
mm-hmm,
emotional ideals, right? And I think that's part of when we talk about this idea of what our culture and society values. And we talk about the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, I think about Plato and I think about the reasoning mind, the emotional mind, the appetitive mind, and I think about how when we're talking about learning and developing character, developing ourselves, developing, the introspective kind of good life, moral compass, is less in that emotional state, right? That you largely drives buying GDP, right? That kind of thing. So when we're living in the seat of emotion, that usually gets a lot of reaction, and actually less openness to this idea of learning ideas that are different from what we are used to, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we talked last year, we were talking a bit about your exposure to different ideas, but you were also less in an emotional state of this exposure being something that is scary, and you were in an open place of, hey, I'm seeing capoeira. Let me explore this. And now this feels right. And now it's a huge part of your life, right? It was something you had to be exposed to, be open to, learn, and then develop and work with, right? But less of just the emotional knee jerk of this is different. I want to stay away from different. I'm scared of different. And I just
Mm-hmm.
want what's comfortable. And no, I don't want to learn because it's scary and different, instead of scary and different can be okay if we're
Mm-hmm.
open and we're developing, some more critical reasoning elements to that too. But
Mm-hmm.
just kind of projecting my own ideas in there. But
No,
also,
good.
when I think about that, when we talk about learning, and we've talked about this for years, that exposing ourselves to various different ideas, and this is what I see with the pod, both as a listener, as a friend, and then I'm sure for you as the host, that exposing yourself to various different ideas, you're learning again various, viewpoints, right? Like, and part of
Mm-hmm.
that can be we're talking about the same thing, but I'm on one side of something, and so like just my hand, right? I'm seeing one side of it. I see this side, you see this side, and we're talking about the same hand, but my perspective is different than yours. So you're seeing something different, and that's where I think the beauty is in exposing ourselves to these different ideas and being open to learning what someone else has to say and what their experience has to offer. And that's part of what I love about the pod. What I love about our conversations all the time is, I usually come away with knowing that I was right about something and Broderick was wrong about something, but it's still good, still a good conversation.
Oh man, that's it, brother. I think like
Yeah,
this it requires that openness, requires
yeah.
a desire. There's a desire to learn. There needs to be some kind of aspiration, and that's a big thing that I've learned too. Is that exposure is one thing, but if you're in that exposure, if that exposure is imposed on you versus you seeking it
Hmm.
out, that's a difference. You're not going to necessarily take it in. And I've learned that in order to learn anything, it requires aspiration. I think I lived most of my life trying to educate myself as much as I can and then sharing what it is that I learned with everybody. And a lot of times I would do that unsolicited. Is that the
Hmm.
right way of saying it? Yeah, I would do
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
without, I'm like, oh, let me share with you these ideas. And they're like, oh, that's
Okay.
interesting. But there's no aspiration. There's no desire to take those ideas in. There needs to
Yeah.
be a desire to learn. Learning requires aspiration and being open to ideas and exploring and challenging your own ideas. That requires agency. And I think that what I was trying to say about, our moral character as a society, is that there's not enough agency or desire to develop ourselves morally, ethically,
Mhm.
because that's just not a priority in our culture. And so, how do we encourage ourselves to, I say ourselves because we have to continuously encourage ourselves to keep growing and learning and never get
Yeah.
satisfied with where we are in our growth. But trying to encourage another person, trying to encourage a society to be interested in this when there's all of these other factors pulling pulling all of us in a different direction, and all these other priorities. It's
Yeah,
like,
there's
well,
competing interests, right? There
yeah,
are
that's
plenty
it.
of competing
Computing, yeah.
interests, and part of it is competing interests that have a lot of energy behind them, whether that's money energy, emotional energy, whatever it is, right? That can distract away from it. And
Mm-hmm.
And then, our minds are programmed for those dopamine hits to get
Mm-hmm.
drawn towards it. So I think kind of how I'm hearing it at least is, instead of going, hey, let's grab everyone out of Plato's cave and throw them in the sunlight and then get
No.
that big reaction, is like, hey, I'm gonna bask in the sunlight and you're welcome to inch your way toward, and I'm gonna be here to help explain what the sunlight is.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least how I'm framing it in my head.
Exactly. All I can do is say, hey, this is what I see. I've learned. Because, you want to help somebody, you want to help a situation. You know how I grew up. I didn't grow up with
Yeah,
much and nothing. I
yeah,
grew up pretty ignorant. And so through that process of learning, I was like, oh, wow, this is a game changer. And this can really
yeah,
help make your life better when you learn more about how the world works, how the game is played.
yeah.
And so it's like, okay, then I can play the game much more effectively the much more knowledge I have about the game. And I think that in order to get that knowledge, it requires me engaging my agency. I need
Mm.
aspiration. I need to have desire, and then I have to put some energy behind it. And I think we don't live. We have to be mindful of the waters that we're swimming in. And I want to use fancy philosophical language, but I'll just say the waters that we're swimming in. What I mean by that, the culture, the set of ideas about what is important, what is valued, and what is not, and that's what I want to say competing against, but that's it. That's the way we're seeing things and what we tend to prioritize. It's being imposed on us. So it's constantly impinging on us all the time. And it's difficult. I get it. It's difficult to step outside of the box. It's difficult because it's fringe. To
Yeah.
be honest, this podcast is almost fringe in turn relative to mainstream culture. And I didn't want to believe that. A lot of the work that I've been doing all these years is fringe, really. Unfortunately, it sounds crazy, but it's actually pretty fringe because lad, you know me now. I get crazy with
Oh
things. I
yeah,
spent the
yeah.
last 10 years reading news, trying to understand the culture, trying to understand the society, not just the United States, but globally. Like, where are we as human beings? And you start to realize, like, okay, there are things that are just not important. This is not a top tier kind of thing to be thinking about. There are other priorities. It's there. It's just not at the top of our priority list. Because if it was, there's
No.
no way this fool would be the president of the United States, for instance. Because the moral character of the society would have said, no way. We may have issues with whoever else, but in terms of our moral standards are such that we will not allow this to happen. And I think that the reason why it was able to happen because our moral standards are not that. People might say that they have these moral standards, but it's not a priority. It's not that important to us relative to all these other things that we think that are important, that we've been conditioned to think that is important by the society that we're living in, by the waters that we're swimming in. So this is hard. I acknowledge it. It's hard, it's difficult, but I think it's something that must be done in order for us to live in a much more loving world. That's my interest. My interest is not just everybody be rich. That's great if everybody's rich. I don't have a problem with that. But that's not my primary interest. My primary interest is that everybody is experiencing these various positive qualities of love and joy and actually living a wonderful, meaningful, loving life. And just being rich alone is not going to do that. That can help, but being rich alone is not it. You can have all that. You can be very wealthy, rich, and
Well, and then you
be
just keep
part.
chasing it.
Yeah, but if the priority is living a good, beautiful life, and that's rooted in a high set of moral standards, that's your priority. Then being rich is not going to be getting in the way of that because that's your gold north star. That's the thing that's that's guiding you. That's the thing. That's the most important principle in your life. And then, yeah, being rich is subsumed under that. That's great. I think that's awesome. But if that is not prioritized in any way, then it's going to get pushed to the side. It's going to get pushed to the side, and you're willing to compromise the thing that's not at the top of your priority list in order to meet the thing that is at the top of your priority list. And I think that's where we find ourselves as a society. Not everyone wants to pick on just the United States. It's not just the United States. It's humans in general. We
Oh, of
have to
course.
evolve. We have to evolve and
And it's
develop.
it's been humans, right? I mean, again,
Yeah.
part of why we're bringing up the ancient Greeks is because this has been a
Yeah.
human long problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
An area that regardless of what kind of era we're in, has been a humanistic problem, a humanistic challenge is how, how do we not live in that emotional state? And when we look at a lot of the just globalized layout of things, I think there's just a lot of the driver is more, again, I always come back to that emotional mind. We have the emotional mind, the appetitive mind, the desiring mind, and then the critical thinking mind, and they're all there at all times, and it's which one are we feeding the most?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the way that the world's working right now, there's a lot of feeding of that desiring and emotional mind, and we have easy access to it, right? We can sit and scroll for hours on end, just feeding both the desiring and the emotional mind over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And so, bringing this back again with like the pod and the learning and developing it in is, from how I view it, is also shifting gears to go, how can I connect into a little bit of that loving, critical thinking mind and
Mm-hmm.
contemplating
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, I want to clarify something right
Yeah.
quick because I know we keep with references and the ancient Greek. So for me, we can, you and I, we can
Hmm.
definitely reference the various
For sure. Yeah.
Indian thinkers and philosophers and as well. So even say Aristotle, let's use Aristotle
Hmm.
as an example. He had, great ideas around what a virtuous life is, a eudaimonia, the good life, and all that kind of stuff. But he still, at that time, they still had slavery. They still
Yeah.
treated women like crap. And I think that even if you have these good ideas, it still needs to so we have these good ideas, and it's a priority to live a virtuous life within the societal worldview that we have, the
Hmm.
culture that we're in. That's great. And we also have to develop and evolve as a culture.
Yep. Yep.
So because I want to be loving and kind and compassionate, but I also recognize that there's a ceilingness there because there are things that I can't see. I
Yeah.
can't
Well, we're a
see
product
these.
of our time, right? Just like
Exactly,
they're a
we're
product
product
of
of.
their time, we're a product of our time. The future generations will be a product of theirs, and it's humanness, right?
That's right.
Um, it's just we're always going to be human until we're cyborg.
Exactly, but which means what I want to stress is that we're continuously learning. I will
Hmm.
never have it all figured out, but I'm in the process. I have some standards. Being a loving person today is going to be different than being a loving person 1,000 years from now if we're still
Hmm.
here as a species.
Hmm.
I can do the best I can, recognizing that in this time that I have my limitations, but I want to acknowledge that and really encourage listeners, the future generations, or try to do something in my life to acknowledge I have limitations. Like in a previous podcast I had with this young man, I was talking about, joking about like I ain't hitting on nothing. You realize that you ain't hitting on nothing. Even if you think you're so wise, you think you know everything, you ain't hitting on nothing. You don't know everything. You are limited. And
Hmm.
recognizing that and saying that, oh, there's more to grow and encouraging future generations. I work with kids, or if you have kids, encouraging them keep evolving, keep developing yourself, keep understanding, getting a broader understanding as a culture, because our capacity to love increases along with that. That's important as well. And I think that, yeah, really stressing that. And it comes back again to learning and continuously growing and developing, not just as an individual self, but as a collective whole, how that is important to continue to drive and push that process. And so, me as an
Yeah.
individual, I recognize I'm connected to a culture and a society. Yes, the choices that I make in my individual self to be a much more loving, kind, and compassionate person, but also what can I do to help nudge and push culture in that direction as well? What kind of ways of thinking or what kind of stories or narrative are we telling that's going to compel, it increases the likelihood of us being more and more loving, whatever that looks like. But we're constantly saying, how do I be more loving? How do I be more compassionate? How do I be more good? How do I bring more beauty into the world? And if I'm continuously, and this is one thing I do like about the
Hmm.
ancient Greeks say it needs to be guided by reason.
Hmm.
And being able to use and engage our critical thinking faculty, because that critical thinking faculty is where our narrative that we're living by, that's the structure, that's the infrastructure, the worldview that we're living by. And if we engage our critical thinking in creating that narrative, that worldview, then that can help us engage in a much more loving world or living a good life, for
Yeah.
instance. So yeah, I just want to make sure before we leave this
Oh
thing
yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
we're bigging up the guys in the past, but they were not perfect, of course, and then
No.
also recognizing that we're not perfect. The guru today is not perfect. The guru tomorrow is not going to be
Well,
perfect.
you might not be perfect, but I'm not gonna claim that for myself, man. My ego's too big. I love it, man. And to me, from what I'm hearing with it all too, is the pod's focus is, we can say it's living the good life, it's living well. The focus, from what I get, is how to be a more loving, kind, compassionate human. And
Yeah.
part of that is through conversation, part of that's through reflection, but hopefully a big part of it's through joy and laughter and smile as well.
Oh,
And I love it, man.
Oh, absolutely. If you can't, pleasure is important.
Hmm.
We won't get
Hey,
into the whole
speaking
idea
of
of
the
Epicureanism.
philosophers, you're right, right. But speaking of philosophers, Hume's probably my favorite because he says, yeah, it's important to do philosophy, think deeply, all that, but it's more important to be merry, play backgammon, and have fun with your friends. Like that. That's part of
Yeah,
it too.
that's what it's all about. The loving part, the joy, the happiness,
Yeah.
all of that is a part of the equation. I think, and you realize there's so much joy in community, so much joy in being a
Yeah.
loving person. And like, yeah, pleasure is an important part of the equation. We should have a subsequent conversation about that and why I think pleasure
Yeah.
drives evolution.
Yeah.
And I think that now I'm not talking, people that we have a nuanced
I got
perspective
you.
on that,
I got you. Yeah.
and I mean that's what
Yeah.
Epicureanism was about.
Yeah.
People like, oh, it's just about hedonism. Like, no, 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 it's like there's joy in being good.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
people are like ascetics,
Yeah.
and it's like, why would, if they were practically like ascetics, why are they saying that pleasure is good? No, 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 because there's pleasure in being a virtuous person, to
Yeah.
live a virtuous life, to live a good life, to live a life of moral excellence. Is pleasurable. It feels good. It feels good to do good, and I think that um, that's important. That and again, I want to there's a little nuance on that. I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast. Is that when I say feel good, not just physically. Sometimes you're doing something good that's for, even if just say selfishly for your own health. You're going to exercising. I usually give the example going on a run. Because you'll run too.
Yeah.
That first mile, you be like, man, what am I doing? Be
That does not feel
burning.
good. Yeah.
It not feel good, but you know that it's good. You know that
Yeah.
your internal organs are feeling good. You know that you're gonna feel good afterwards. You know that for the next few days you feel good because you got the blood flowing.
Yeah.
Your lungs are clear, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your muscles are engaged. That feels good. And so and then also that that it's good for your psychological health, your mental health, and recognizing that this idea of pleasure, there's a lot of complexities involved in this notion of pleasure. And yeah, to live a good life, yeah, laughter, joy, all those things are just, for me, I that just comes with it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that just
Yeah.
comes with
Comes
it.
with the territory. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Man, we
Well,
better get off this thing, man.
yeah, yeah, we'll need to wrap up, but is there any last thing you want to leave to the audience about what the pod's been, where you want to go, what living the good life is?
Yeah, I think I pretty much said it there, man. I think, hey, listeners, I think I've really outlined here, we've outlined here what this is all about. And yeah, tell more people about it and have more conversations about the good, being loving,
Yeah.
or whatever positive quality that you can come up with. Some of you might listen to this and be like, man, I wholeheartedly disagree with this dude. Great. I'm glad you're
Yeah.
thinking. I'm glad you're contemplating, reflecting on that.
The
Tell other people about it, and
yeah.
let's grow together. Let's connect. I want more. I want to do this more.
And man, it's to me, it's so vital that we can live in harmony with each other in disagreement, right? I
Oh
think
yeah,
so
man.
much has been
That's
so focused on we can't be loving and kind to each other if we disagree. It's like, no, we have to live together in harmony with disagreement. And so on that, I think we can sign off, man. But I love you, brother. It's always good chatting and diving deep with you on it all.
Yeah, I love you too, bro. And like, thank you for interviewing me, or having this conversation with me, asking me these questions. And I'm gonna flip it. I mean, you kind of outlined some of your ideas, but we're gonna flip this and have you come. And I'm gonna interview you about your perspective on the good life. That would be great. Yeah, I think you're old enough.
No, I don't know, man.
somewhat.
My body's telling me I'm old enough, that's for sure. My body's screaming it. You're an elder, Andrew.
You're getting there.
Ah, man,
We
man.
can we can have you on here and sharing your
Brother,
wisdom,
I was
man.
looking back and I'm going, wait a second. I've known Broderick for how long now? Oof,
I
okay.
know. It's been a minute, right? It's
It's
been
been
a
a minute,
while.
bro.
I
Yeah.
can't believe how time
I
has
I didn't
gone
even
by
know
like
that I was
that.
as old as I am,
I know,
considering how
right?
long we've known each other.
I know. But yeah, man, this is good. And thank you.
Of
And
course.
yeah, we'll have you back soon, actually. I would love to have you
Yeah.
back soon and I interview you and really explore and these ideas. And again, listeners, yeah, I'll keep listening. And if you have anything you want to share, please share and send a message. Go to Substack, subscribe. I know I've been trying
Yeah.
to. I said I was going to write something. I have all these. I'm so bad about this. I have these partially written things, and my perfectionism gets in the way. And I'm like, no, it's not good enough. I'm like, brother, it's a Substack. Just post the darn thing. It doesn't need to be perfect, but I
No,
will at some
just get
point.
it out.
Yeah, I will at some point post some of this stuff that I've written. I've written quite a bit of stuff, and yeah, but the podcast is there, and if you want to financially support it, I encourage it. If you can, I would love that and appreciate that because it will help. It can help me expand and do more. I have so many ideas about what to do with this, and yeah, there are limitations. I do live in the real world of the United States where that requires you need finances to survive, and I am not independently wealthy like that. So it would be great to get your financial support, and even more important than that is that you're listening, you're tuning in, and open to sharing this with other people who may find this podcast stimulating and invigorating in their own exploration of what makes life worth living. So lots of love to you all. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.